Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome. Today I'm really excited to be chatting and sharing very similar positive energies with Bex Moorhouse, founder of Invigorate Spaces.
Yeah.
Really excited also because she's got a really great history from her time of workspace director at Nike, the very well-known sports fashion brand as we all know it, and personally it's made a big impact on my life through running and understanding running and applying that through my life. So it does mean a lot to me. So how, Bex, have you got to where you've got to today? You've had one amazing career.
Oh my goodness. God, it's been like, I hate to say it, but like a massive journey. Like I literally didn't know what career I wanted to go into.
Yeah.
I just knew that I wanted to help people. That was kind of always in my DNA.
Yeah.
Love sport as well, and kind of fitness, and putting that kind of first really within my whole life. And I literally just ended up really in serviced offices, first of all, so delivering like exceptional services, buildings and everything like that. Okay. And then ended up through that process getting to work at Nike, running all of their real estate in the UK and Ireland, designing their new headquarters, which was in London a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And then I obviously set up the business. So I've kind of been on this journey and growing in confidence over that time and feeling more capable of like just going out there and doing it, really.
But that trajectory is wicked. Yeah. To having and then crowning it all to having founding your own space.
Yeah.
So what does Invigorate Spaces stand for?
Yeah.
What's that? What's your vision and values?
Yeah, no problem. So I have obviously spent a lot of my career with massive corporates, global organizations, and I always felt like it was about the people. And the bigger the company gets, the more, unfortunately, you become like a number within this massive company.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you know, everyone, you've all got your own unique superpowers, and I think sometimes corporates forget that actually everybody brings something slightly different. We can probably all do the same role, but we're going to do it very differently.
Yeah.
And so the consultancy was built up to basically breathe life into the corporate world, so that the corporates understood you had a life outside of work, and also you had all this lived experience that you could bring with you into the workplace. So what we do is kind of go in and help companies with what their environment looks like from a wellbeing standpoint, what the experiences are like, and also what the culture's like, so that, you know, there's real joy in work. And, you know, I've always found joy in work. And when people say they don't, I just think it's really sad. And I want to do something different and make sure that people enjoy the job that they do.
Yeah, amazing. I'm normally saying that, so I'm just looking, I don't really know what to say next, because that's what I kind of always say.
Yeah.
But helping people to flourish and become the best version of themselves, I mean, what more enriching can we do in our lives? I mean, that's excellent. So do you still work with people like Nike?
Yeah.
As a consultant?
Yeah, so I end up, I'm doing lots of different things. Sometimes it's a one-off workshop, which is some of the things that I've been doing for Nike recently, just around how they can kind of be have their holistic fitness in a good spot to kind of be the best versions of themselves for their customers when they come in through retail doors. I've done lots of different kind of working with massive companies yet again, in terms of how they want to work now, because we're in this hybrid world. How do you adopt to hybrid working? So much I get involved in. And I've got to say, I feel really blessed that actually people trust me to go in and kind of do this type of work, because it's real changing mentalities and changing behaviours in order to work in a different way, which I hope is going to make people happier and healthier in the process. At work, we are in this constant cycle all the time, emails pinging in, notifications and everything like that. And it's like, how do you cut through all that noise and actually deliver good work, good quality work with less of that kind of stress laboured on top, basically?
Yeah, so you're talking about productivity.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to pick up on that.
Good.
But you did mention culture, which is one of my favourite words.
Yeah.
I think that when a company really understands its why, why are they even here? What are they bringing to planet Earth? And what would we miss if they weren't here? I know what I would miss from Nike, for example, and I know what people would miss from Stanson's. But if you don't understand your why, like your whole workspace why kind of will fall to bits, I guess. Do you find that people don't clearly define their why, or do you help them define their why?
I think sometimes it is defining their why. I think sometimes they think they've got a really clear why, and then I visit the offices and I go, "Oh, your mission is this," but I don't see that in the way the space looks. Like I always feel like when you go into a company headquarters, you should effectively be like, you could be blindfolded, take the blindfold off and know that you're in a particular company's building.
Yeah,
and I don't mean that in the sense of, company logos or anything trashy like that. I mean, a feeling that you get when you're in the space that okay, let's say on the Nike example, like, oh, there's movement here in the way the design looks. So it suggests there's movement. Maybe it's a sports brand. You get that feeling of the company just by the aesthetic of the way it looks.
Yeah.
And also the way people are in the space as well.
So do you do workspace design?
No, so I just support basically. So
you understand it?
Yeah, and so I just always support, and I feel like sometimes we need to think about like, why are we using the space or how are we going to use the space in order to formulate that good design. So I suppose that's where my like change management hat comes on as well, where I love to engage with people to find out how they actually are going to use the spaces in order to get the best design. So that flow is super important to me. Like, how can you make sure people naturally have to move in the space, but not in a point that's kind of laboursome? You don't want a waste paper bin, as an example, like right down the other end of the office. But by the same token, we need to be considering how we make it more sustainable, how we can kind of get rid of that rubbish in the best way, but like not make it too laboursome to do all of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I often sort of hear people talking about collaboration, for example, and then the collaboration spaces are like bare empty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's about, I guess, rather than having the words collaboration, it's about how can we maybe even design in pinch points, design in so people like bump into each other and start talking to each other. So actually creating those bottlenecks, maybe like it's not for everybody, I know, but it's just like as an idea, like rather than just saying collaboration, having an empty collaboration space, it doesn't mean you're collaborative, right? So no, that's interesting. Do you find when you're talking to, you'd be talking to workspace designers, or would you be talking to like clients looking to take a new office?
So it's it depends what project I'm working on. Sometimes I'm working just with designers to kind of support them with experience of like how the space could be used. And then other times it's talking with colleagues themselves to say like, what's your vision for what the office would look like? What do you need, etc., and kind of formulating it that way. So it can vary.
Brilliant. If you were to write a brief then for those people, what would that involve?
Oh God, all the things. It's very convoluted, isn't it? But like basically all the things from what do you expect to see in terms of meeting room sizes, collaboration points, technology, that whole thing. And again, what I found a lot through the course of all the different projects I've worked on is sometimes all of that is done in isolation. So I try to bring together like the technology with the actual furniture and that whole thing connected together. Because I find sometimes, you might have this beautiful big table that's created in a meeting room as an example, but actually the space needs to flex, so the big table can't be dismantled or the technology doesn't work in the big table. Do you know what I mean? And all of that other stuff that goes with it. So I suppose it's that operational angle over the top of it all.
What goes wrong in offices the most?
Oh, the biggest thing that I hear of is technology, to be honest with you. Yeah. I hear of it so much. I mean, like how now everybody's doing sort of activity-based working. So you sort of just literally go and supposedly just plug in your laptop and you're good to go. Nothing works. That's what I think is the frustration. And companies I see are blaming the employees. So saying, you keep taking cables out, you keep messing with the equipment. And I like to go in as an independent and say they're doing that because it doesn't work. So it's not your employee that's the problem. It's the fact that the technology isn't working, and so many people, unfortunately, build out these beautiful offices and then they never onboard people into the spaces. So they don't know how to use, these amazing screens that might be in meeting rooms or all of this incredible technology like mirror boards, whiteboards, electronic digital whiteboards, or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not actually spending time with colleagues to work out how do you use it? What's the capabilities of this? How does it work? It's that kind of change management piece that doesn't happen.
So do you think the onboarding is the answer to that problem?
Yeah, I think it is. And also quick ways for employees to log faults with stuff as well. I mean, I know obviously we're getting into the FM world now, but, at the end of the day, if there was a quick mechanism for you to report something, you would probably report it. But unfortunately, there's usually like, what desk are you at? What building are you in, what, you know, area of the office are you in, and all of this stuff, and you just think, I haven't got time, like I'm sales director or whatever my job is, and I don't have time for this stuff. So I think making that kind of accountability for everyone to love the office they're in and support the space that they're in is very well and good, but the technology to report those issues needs to be there as well.
So handover day is really the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not the end. I mean, if from a design perspective, it feels like the end, but actually it's the beginning of the journey for the staff and the people actually using that space. And then the onboarding and the management and the revisiting, I guess, of that space, how they're adapting to it. Does it then need to change again in the future? And continuing that consultancy would mean that the space is much more like productive and profitable and used.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, to be totally honest with you, that kind of ramping up to moving into the space, having the period where I've noticed this a lot on projects, like once the build is done, once all of the kind of experiential services have been put in, everybody wants to open the doors. And I always try to say on my projects I work on, can we have a week or 2 weeks where colleagues can just drop in for like an hour, 2 hours to see the space, feel the space, and have that kind of like on-ramping experience, if you know what I mean, like a soft launch like you'd get in a restaurant, just to try everything. And then once they're in their first day working in the office, it's not too much of a surprise, right? They've been in, they've seen it, they've tasted it, so to speak. And then the other end of the project is having that fixed time of saying there's no changes that are going to happen for, you know, 100 days or whatever it might be, because people take time to adapt to new spaces. And what I see a lot is poor designers having to come back in really quickly and rebuild spaces because they're saying, oh, you know, colleagues aren't using them in the right way or they can't make use of them. But actually new spaces take time to adapt to. So
interesting.
I would always say not to make any changes within the first sort of 3 months of a go live.
So change slow, like within a period.
Yeah, exactly. Just because you know what it's like, new spaces take time to adapt to. Everyone adapts at different times, and actually allowing your colleagues or employees to decide how they want to use the space, I think, is also really important. Like I've seen design briefs before where there's a quiet space that's been created in the office. If people start to use it in a different way, I've seen people go, well, that was a quiet space. Why are they making noise, or why are they doing X, Y, Z? Instead, let the colleagues decide, make it like, you know, that you see about destination routes, don't you, where people make their own paths and stuff like that. Why would you not allow your colleagues to use it in a different way? Maybe the design intent hasn't been, you know, executed in the right way, or colleagues don't like it for that reason. So just let them have a bit of freedom with the space and own that space a bit more as well.
Yeah, I love that. Bit more of everybody's on the journey, bit more together, which any culture should embrace. Like anybody's vision and culture should be about bringing people together to a degree. This is quite an open, like, to interpretation, but what is the office for, in your opinion? What is the benefits of it? Or should we all just work from home forever?
Oh, no. Do you know what? I've got to say at the very start, I mean, I've been in workplace my whole career pretty much, so either selling it, managing it, or, you know, it's been a part of my whole life. And with the conflict of like hybrid working and everything like that, I thought, oh, do you know what? I really like working at home. If you think about it, home is like your perfect version of life, right? Because you've got to pick everything and you've had that autonomy to make decisions on your space. And I thought, oh, I'm going to love it working at home. But you do get lonely, don't you, a little bit? And so I think the workplace is a way to sort of touch and feel the brands that you work for. It's a way where it's almost like a recharge point. That's how I like to think of it, or like, you know, like a mobile recharging point where you go and you plug back into the culture, the feeling of the space of the company you're working for, and get recharged so you can go back home and do that kind of productive execution type work. I think the workspace itself should be somewhere where you want to come to because it's your tribe of people. Like you feel like you belong, you feel like you're part of something bigger. That's what I think the workplace should be. And I worry when companies are saying to colleagues now, go back 3 days, 4 days a week. It's becoming very transactional again. They've started to go back and sit at a desk. And it's like, for me, that I wouldn't be going to an office to sit at a desk. I'd be going to have conversations, to find out what's happening in different departments, what's our next brand campaign going to be, or whatever. Like recharging myself around the momentum of what that company mission is, not going and doing emails and transactional work that I could do at home.
And I agree. I feel that it's the workspace is almost an opportunity for to almost be like a members club, like the epitome of your brand experience at its absolute best, where someone can come in and just be totally absorbed with your brand, your culture, your vision, your values, and then wherever they are, coffee shops abroad, wherever, that they have got this kind of like, yeah, re-energized, if you like, for your brand and what you stand for. And I think it's important that we historically think so much of that as a retail space, but and people going into a Nike store, that it feels like Nike, whereas I'm sure Nike do it, but going to the office and it feels like Nike, right? So it is about that brand engagement piece for your most important people, your teams and your staff, right? So it is I totally get that, and from someone's purpose and of a workspace, that should really be what it is.
Yeah.
Just reflect your vision.
Yeah, I think so. And you know what, if you're not getting it right in that headquarters or your kind of base location,
Yeah.
it's like, why would you not be valuing your employees, who are the bread and butter of your business? Like, they're your most important asset.
Yes.
And therefore, I think that a lot of the spaces that companies are providing for their staff, they're substandard, actually. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a bigger issue around, it's not just about providing desks and, you know, computers that work and all of that. Those are just the keeping the lights on things that are a baseline expectation. It's more about like being part of something bigger. I think that's where I think offices have an amazing role to play.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the baseline. I like that, because I was chatting to someone the other day on a project, and we're talking about like neurodiversity and about how the light switches would be here, and it was actually like, you're only meeting legal requirements. You're not doing anything special for them. You're literally doing what you have to do, otherwise you'll be taken to court. So, and providing a desk and a chair is like a minimum. You can't physically come in without one. So it's about totally like deleting that level and just rethinking, like, how can we, I'm going to use your word, energize these people and recharge them with our brand experience. Love that. So how many spaces did you have to manage when you're at Nike?
Oh God, now I'm trying to think back. So I had a variety of spaces. So I had different offices. So we had two kind of corporate offices. And then I did support for Nike Town London, and also did support for Converse as well. So we're part of Nike. And then also warehousing space randomly, which a lot of people wouldn't expect that we had to look after. But we had UK warehousing. At the time that I was there, Chelsea Football Club had their warehouse. So I got involved with that as well. So making sure that all the staff there had like their basic PPE, that it was all safe. So I covered off health and safety as well as part of my role. So yeah, it was just varied, good. And Ireland as well. I forgot about Dublin. Poor Dublin people, probably. Yeah, but we had Ireland as well. So it was a busy job, but it was just like fun. Do you know what I mean? That's the best way to think of it, really. Just a lot of fun.
Yeah. So is there a perfect location for an office?
Oh, that's such a good question. Do you know what, I'm amazed by the amount of people who select an office based on where the senior stakeholder lives, right?
Oh, you're joking.
No, honestly,
Is that actually a thing?
It's actually a thing, yeah, where like there can be an office kept in a particular location. You think, why are we keeping that office? And then you realise like the finance director or whoever is located nearby. And I'm surprised by the amount of people who don't actually look at where their staff live and do like a proper assessment to make sure that it's actually commutable for everyone. But I guess it depends. Like a lot of organisations want to be near their customers as well. So it might be, you know, high street location near customers. It could be. I don't think the campus model is so great in the sense.
When you say the campus model, explain it.
Okay. So like, say for example, you see a lot of companies who will find a campus location. So basically, usually like outside of the city, where people can drive to, and they can build much kind of grander locations. So you could have like a running track, you could have swimming pool, whatever, the whole shebang in a campus location. I think that younger talent don't want to live in those kind of quieter spots, do you know what I mean, or live near it. So I think it's kind of, I guess, down to what type of talent you're trying to attract and what type of talent do you want to retain, you know what I mean? Personally, I think that if you can create a space which is in a city location that's going to benefit like the local community as well, then that is something that I think you should be doing as an organization. So you can kind of like activate the local space with your employees. Do you know what I mean? Spending their money outside and actually giving back in some sort of way.
So when you say supporting the local community, you're meaning in terms of the transactions of people going out to the gym and the restaurants and
exactly.
Nice.
Because you see a lot of big companies like the Googles, etc., they're creating more and more kind of internal experiences, and sometimes employees will go in the morning, check in, they get their breakfast paid for, their lunch paid for, their dinner paid for, even gym facilities on site. They might be in there for 10 hours, you know what I mean? 10, 12 hours, and there's not a dime spent anywhere else. Do you know what I mean? So I think if you can find a way that you can benefit the local community, like why wouldn't you, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting. Or even collaborating with them to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
And do
the
food or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's nice. Okay. And the place of where an office is located, I think we often like look at the interior design of a space and how that changes how people think, feel, and behave, which kind of makes sense. But then the contextual like design, like from the point of view of the journey to that space, what that journey looks like, whether you're going through green spaces or what method of transport you're using, all those sort of things are important too. And is that something that you can actually take into consideration, or is it kind of out of your hands?
I think every company can kind of think about it. A great example actually was when I was working at Nike, we were building out the logistics center, logistics campus, and we were trying to obviously encourage movement. So the team that were working on that particular project, I wasn't involved, but the team that were doing it said, let's start to reward movement. So for example, if you cycled to campus, the traffic lights would all go in your favour. So if you were on a bike and you appeared at the traffic lights, they'd turn green because you're on a bike, so you're going to get priority. All of the cars would have to wait for the cyclists. They were the priority. If you cycled, you got closer to the front door, so you could walk into work and not get wet, because literally you would be wet because you've come on a bike, but you know what I mean? You'd have a, what do you call it, like a canopy that you'd go under. So I think there's stuff like that you can do to encourage whatever it is that you want, whatever behaviours or culture you want from your staff.
This was a project you worked on?
So I wasn't actually involved, but it was our team, if that makes sense, our European team, who said, actually, we're going to reward people for running or cycling to work to try to reduce emissions. So the whole thing was to make the campus as sustainable as possible. If you were on a bike, the lights went for you.
That's next level.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just spoke to the local council.
It's because they ran the whole campus area, so they could control, obviously. And that's the other thing as well. When you're at that level, it's like sometimes you're owning the space, or you've got good ability to kind of go and meet with the local councils or whoever it might be to make this kind of stuff happen.
I think people often underestimate the influence that they have.
Yeah.
I mean, even smaller like people, I mean, we're talking at Nike here, and I get it, they've got a massive influence and everyone kind of gets that. But even for smaller people, like, it's amazing how much change you can drive by talking about something and going and meeting people and sharing a genuine concern or an initiative. But I love that people actually got rewarded for cycling or running to work.
Yeah. And I think you can do that with so many different aspects as well. And I think, when you're thinking about the way that you're going to commute into work, you could reward people with something as simple as a cup of coffee. If they take public transport instead of coming in their car or whatever it might be, that whole journey to work, I think people forget that, we record as a company, you record your sustainability in the building, but you don't record actually what it's costing in terms of carbon, etc., for people to get in. So it's stuff like that where you can just be really good citizens and think of things outside of the four walls. So many companies don't. They're a real estate director and they just think they're responsible for that little bit of square footage or whatever, but actually no, you can have a positive impact on the local community. When I set up the London HQ for Nike, we created the gym ground level with doors to go in from the outside street. And I remember the developer saying to me, we can block all that off. And I said, no, we don't want to, because our aim is at some point in time, we will be able to welcome in the local community into the gym, literally totally secure, not part of the rest of the campus location. You could just go in, exercise and do that. And that's exactly what they've done since I've left. They've invited the local community in to do exercises, and really kind of made their mark on that King's Cross location.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah,
That's absolutely beautiful.
yeah,
I have to go there.
yeah, you have to check it out.
And also talking about like sustainability and impact, I think it's really easy with for myself as well, because I'm in the industry, but like from a workspace design perspective, to think about the materials that we use, and we've got recycled fishing nets for our carpet and like old t-shirts for our curtains, all that sort of thing, which is great. But actually the building infrastructure, and whether that is generating clean air and the lighting and playing with people circadian rhythms, is so important. Yeah, it kind of, the building gets given to the people and then they work with what they've got. But actually, to step back, do you think we can influence the planet in a positive, impact the planet positively by having more of a strategic approach to the buildings that we pick?
Yeah, 100%. But you know what, it's difficult because sometimes I think for companies, say real estate teams, sometimes even if you're a real estate director, you might be told this is the location for the new office. It might not be, it might be out of your hands, in which case you've just got a building you've got to do something with. At the moment, what I worry about, I'm not saying it's keeping me up at night, but one of the things I do worry about is the new legislation that's coming with sustainability. There's so many like really bad category office space out there that's just going to end up being mothballed, because to get it to a point where it will pass all of the accreditation that's required, it'll cost too much money. So I think it's a fine balance between finding the perfect location versus taking an older building, let's say, and trying to I can't even think of the name, renovate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And also just demolishing things
Yeah.
that aren't at end of life. There is no point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unsustainable in itself.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So we need to think about longevity and about extending the use of everything that we have existing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really hard balance, because I'm looking at things through the whole of the well-being kind of cycle, and sustainability is obviously part of that well-being cycle. But employees, when they're in space, like as an example, they might want lots of like glass and be able to kind of get lots of natural daylight into the floor plate. But then we know from a sustainability perspective, that's where heat's going to go through. That's going to take a lot to cool it in summer, etc. So you're always trying to balance all these levers to make sure you're doing the best that you can with what you have. You know what I mean? Because sometimes those two sides of the coin don't balance.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So then you've got this brilliant space that's sustainable, that in a great location, and we understand now why. So people are coming into that. How should they feel and engage?
Oh. Do you know, I love when you say feel, because I've been on this rampage at the moment. Like everybody's talking about data in workspaces, which I absolutely love. I feel like you need a lot of data in a workspace, but I really worry about like what people feel like. And I always, when I was running buildings, I always wanted people to feel welcome for starts. So for me, I think that whole welcome experience is really important. I think for people who are managing buildings that maybe aren't up to scratch, like how can they get people instead to be receptionists or whatever it might be, to welcome people in the right way? Because I think people can overcome some of the issues with a building, if that makes sense. So I think that feeling of being welcome, but also like I love the multi-sensory like approach to spaces. So like I've been talking about this a lot recently, and some people go, oh, she's gone mad. But for me, it's like that high-end experience of like, what does the space smell like? What does it feel like? Do I feel calm? Do I feel like engaged with this space? And all of those things are super important for me. And I like to think of those as like triggers, so that if you were to go to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a company, I don't know, Adidas, let's say you were to go into an Adidas store, like what would it smell like? If you could land in an Adidas store somewhere else globally, would it have exactly the same smell? It probably would, if they're clever. Do you know what I mean? And it's that whole thing of like, that's a trigger point that, okay, that's one thing checked, that I know I'm coming here for this, and you're getting that nice feeling with it. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Is fragrance just simply about having consistency, or can fragrance change how we behave?
I think it can change how we behave. Ultimately, there's so many people that are super smart in this area, and I've got to say I'm not one of them. But there's so many people who talk about how you can be completely invigorated by a fragrance, and then you can take another fragrance and it'll knock out whatever your feeling was from before, to kind of like cleanse your palate almost. I know it's not your palate, but your nasal passages, and then you move on to the next one. So yeah, you can use it exactly the same as you would color scheme as well, in terms of how you feel in a space. Like, I've always been in a building that I've looked after, I've always been really in favor of communal spaces being a bit more kind of high energy, and then working spaces being more kind of like muted.
So how do you make them high energy?
So that might be music, so playing on the senses. So communal spaces being music, fragrance, the whole shebang. So you're feeling everything when you come in. But then when you work, you need a bit more focus potentially. So it'd be more muted colours. Like, I'm looking around this room and seeing how beautiful this is, exactly like this, like everything feeling the same, and the tactile flooring, etc. Those kind of things to make you feel completely different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I agree. And then, so when you say something's high energy, you're talking like bright colors, like fast-paced music. I don't know what fragrance is high energy.
I think you need like that welcome point. I think you need that to be like the boom, you're here type feeling. So it might be something that it needs to resonate with what your brand is again.
Yes.
And I love companies that are making their own fragrance. So you literally walk in. There's a shop, I think it's called Ayushu, but don't quote me on that. Spanish fitness brand. The smell in those stores, everywhere you go, is exactly the same. The minute you smell it, you feel the energy of that brand, and it's strange, but it literally is like that. So I think colours, yes, not always bright colours. It can just be all the different materials, or maybe it's just lots of curtain treatments, different stuff going on that makes you look around and see, there's lots of things to look at in this space. It doesn't always have to be the bold colours. And I've got to say, when I first went to Nike, I went to look around the space, obviously, of the office at the time. It was beautiful, but it was clear it had been done by a brand campaign in terms of the way it looked, rather than somebody who's designing for workspaces, because every part of that office was like pumped. It was literally like colours like everywhere.
Just do it.
Yeah, like literally like energy. And it almost felt relentless. Like, when you walked around the space, there wasn't that flow of like, oh, I know why I'm going to that quiet space. The lighting wasn't different. There was no muted like ability to turn lighting down or any control of anything. It was all just like, this is it. Like, you've got this and that's what you get, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
I feel like I'm being maybe a bit ethereal, but you know what I mean?
No, I can totally picture it.
Yeah.
Obviously, just knowing Nike.
Yeah.
As a retail and going into a shop, that's fine, because you are going in, you're transactional, you're in there for half an hour at the most.
Yeah.
And then you're back out again, or online, you're quite quick and you're gone again. But when you've actually got to spend 8 hours a day, you need those different zones, because we're humans, and we are going to have different days. And for a start, where we feel more pumped and less pumped.
Yeah.
And then also we've got different tasks and might need to chat. And sometimes I think people talk about acoustics, sometimes I think about the absence of sound is that can actually be negative.
Yeah.
Or it can actually be really distracting. And it's about getting the fine balance. And I get asked about what's the right level of acoustics. And I'm like, it's a little bit like saying, like, what's the right temperature?
Yeah.
Like, it's very personal, dependent on the space, dependent on where you are, what you're doing, and who's there. Like, about 30 degrees is the right temperature for me if I'm on a beach. But about 20 degrees is right if I'm in an office, and about sort of -10 is if I'm skiing. So you've got to get it right for the situation. And I think that's actually, it's not a broad brush. We've got to be intelligent. Yeah. Which I think is exactly what you're picking up, which I love. That's quite exciting.
And I also think as well, like, again, I understand from a corporate level, you want like a BMS system that runs the building at X temperature, and you can flex between X and X for sustainability, for comfort, etc. But I really want to see workplaces getting more in tuned in terms of like me being able to control something in that workspace. So maybe I can dim the lights in my area if I want to, or I can turn the noise up, or I can get it warmer in my area within a certain parameter. I think that bit is missing at the moment, where you go into a workspace and it's a little bit like you just get what you're given. But actually imagine if you could work within parameters and adjust things specifically for yourself. It would feel like I'm part of this now because they care about me. Whereas at the moment, everything's very generic, that, you know, it is what it is almost. And I think that's an area where in the future we're going to see that kind of bespoke tailoring of spaces a little bit more. I don't know how we do it necessarily in terms of like little things like light and dimming lights and stuff like that. I think is super easy to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's so much happening. Like another example, I introduced coffee machines at the Nike location, where you could preset for your strength of coffee that you were going to get in the morning. And it was on your app. You did that and you just clicked your phone on the app and the machine gave you the coffee that you wanted. Imagine if you could do that in a workspace, you know, so the table was at exactly the right height when you got there, that it was made for you, you know. And I think we've got some way to go with that, but I think that's an interesting area that people might explore.
I think that's very interesting. It's kind of a little bit well, probably actually a lot come from our experience at home, where we have exactly the coffee we want and exactly the right height chair and height table. Like it is what you mentioned earlier. You've built it, you've done it. It is perfect for you. And so kind of having that uniformity, but that customization and sort of personalization of spaces so that you can make it ideal for how you work. Yeah, I think that's a big topic that I haven't actually heard a lot of people talking about. So yeah, it's just how people would do that, isn't it? I guess how they can explore how to do that.
Yeah, and I do think, like, I'm not an advocate for just layering on extra things that cause friction, but I do think sometimes in the grand scheme of it, we're spending money on, say, an app to reserve a desk, and like that's friction to me. That's like that's a barrier for me as an employee going in. Like I've got to select a desk, otherwise I won't be allowed in or whatever. Instead, why are we not looking at things that are actually going to improve how the space works? So it could be an app that, you know, make sure the desk is going to be at the right height when you get there and the chair is going to be perfect for you, so you don't spend 15 minutes getting all of that ready before you even start work, you know. So I think sometimes we look at a whole workspace and we focus in on things that actually aren't driving an improvement for colleagues when they come in or visitors, and instead we should be focusing on what that experience is like.
Yeah. Do people know what they need from a workspace, or do we have to educate them?
I think it's a two-way process. I think sometimes people don't even think about it, right? They're just on autopilot. They go into work. They know what annoys them and what doesn't work, so they can report that to you. But I don't think they give it as much time as probably it deserves in terms of like what could it be like and what could the space deliver? You know what I mean? I don't think people give it probably as much time as it should. And I also don't think that people who are running buildings, so corporate real estate, I don't think they ask people enough, like, you know, run workshops, focus groups, all that stuff to get people's feedback on things. And I think when companies are rolling out multiple projects in multiple locations, if you think about it, they're delivering a new build in one area, they're already building out another one somewhere else. And so what you do see is mistakes happening over multiple projects, because that kind of feedback loop of lessons learned doesn't come quick enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I do feel I have personal passion that people don't realize how much potential they've got.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't undervalue their potential and undervalue the impact that they can have on the world, on their relationships, everything.
Yeah.
And to actually open their eyes as to that and like raise the ceiling in their mind as to what they can achieve in life, large scale, and then how the workspace can enable that, I think is actually quite a big tool. And I do think we're responsible in this industry to do that and make sure that the teams and the staff there are not just being empowered, but also and empowered and enabled, but also showing them a vision for themselves or showing them how to find a vision for themselves, do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really important. And now when people are looking for a job, they're looking for it to align to what their values are. They're trying to find what their purpose is, and they're kind of clinging on to companies and going, well, that sounds like what I'm like, so let me give this a go and see. And I feel it's a real shame that people, for whatever reason, don't really understand their potential. You know, from personal experience, I spent so many years like lacking in confidence to the point where, you know, I was doing all the jobs, doing everything I needed to do, but I had no idea of what I was capable of, you know, and that wasn't, I don't know why that was. Like, my parents brought me up in a good way, but it's just one of those things where you have to sort of like try, prove it to yourself, and then kind of go into this loop, don't you, of going, actually, I'm all right at this, I can do it. And you keep going and growing. Managers play a massive role, I think, in that though as well. And the more a manager controls everything that happens in a team, the less people have that ability, I think, to see what they're capable of.
I think a manager is almost like a therapist.
Yeah.
It's so deep, right?
Yeah.
What's the most common reason people don't come into the office?
God, do you know what? There's all manner of things. I think habit is a big one.
Okay.
I think people have just got used to being at home. And if you think about it, it's less to think about. Like, you just get up, do whatever you've got to do, crack on with your laptop, get working, and you can have your normal life going on in the background. You might be able to put a wash on at the same time and all of that. So I think habit. I think sometimes we don't want to do what is actually good for us. So, like I said at the very start of the conversation, like when home working started, I was like, oh, I really like this. But then it was only like 6 months, 7 months in, I was like, oh, I'm a bit lonely. So maybe I need to get myself out, you know? Sometimes we just get too comfortable. I don't know, maybe that's what it is. I think people just get too comfortable staying at home, not, you know, not connecting. And then I suppose the other flip of it is sometimes they're not feeling like they can be authentically themselves at work. So I think that's another big
Stifling.
one. Yeah. That, you know, if you've got to go and sit next to, I'm going to say it, like negative Nancy every day, do you know what I mean? Like, do you want that? You probably don't. You might think, oh, actually, if I'm at home, I can protect my energy. I can have my own music on. I can kind of like recharge myself between meetings or whatever it might be. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's like working out. And I think it's like what we eat. You can have a day where you might skip a workout. You can have a day where you might eat bad. But over a long period of time, you will then start to suffer. So I think the odd working from home here and there, that's fine. But it's not always easy to eat right, and it's not always easy to work out. But you've got to do what's right, not what's easy, if you want to get ahead in life, like just generally.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to see, if we are to give our career the best shot, we've got to do what's right. And what's right, I'm not saying every day, but it is about engaging in the workspace, being recharged with that brand. If you're in a leadership role, influencing and sharing positive energy with the people that are around you. And if you're not in a leadership role, do not underestimate how powerful your energy and your influence is, because it is massive.
Yeah.
And you really can achieve anything that you can. And it's just about finding those wings and flying, but you won't find them stuck behind a laptop at home.
Yeah.
So I'm very passionate about that, but I do always put a lot of things back to nutrition and working out, which all started with Nike for me. So it's very ironic that we're chatting today and I'm saying that to you. Like, my wife would laugh because she knows how I've started my whole development journey with Nike Run Club.
God, it's amazing, isn't it? But it is so true. Unless you challenge yourself and push yourself forward, you will never know what you're capable of. And I think that comfort, I know I've spoken about it, but I think comfort, nothing really good happens in comfort. Like, it feels good at the time, but then actually you can get stifled by that comfort. And I think that is, unfortunately, it's the path of least resistance to just stay at home, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It is. And I think if you don't want to get ahead and you want to just take an easy ride, then sure, go for it. I'm not saying it's right for everyone to power ahead and push ahead in their lives, and not everyone wants to do that. And that's fine if that's your ambition. There's no right and wrong. If that is your ambition, then you should be looking at it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What people need in a space is really important. We've identified that. And we also identified that people maybe not even know what they need. So how can we find out? How do you?
So I try to do like day in the life ofs. So I effectively set up focus groups with an organization and say, okay, walk me through what your day looks like. So what kind of tasks are you doing? What people are you meeting?
Face to face?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can be done virtually as well. But I think you get more out of people face to face. So I just ask people like, what's your normal day look like? Where are you? Like, what activities are you doing in the day? And then effectively look at the space and how the space can effectively deliver all of those things that need to be required. So one of the things I've been seeing a lot recently is a lot of the big kind of interior design companies are creating these like generic floor spaces, which look beautiful, but they don't fulfill the tasks of the teams that are required in those spaces. So like classic example, law practice recently, they have loads of filing. I mean, it's horrendous, but they have loads of filing, and it wasn't even part of the original brief. So it's like, how did that get missed? Do you know what I mean? So it's those kind of layering on of going, okay, like they're going to have filing. They need the physical, you know, I don't even know what you call those things. What do you call
Filing
them? Massive
cabinets.
filing cabinets, yeah. But also even those filing cabinets need the floor reinforced and all of that jazz as
Oh,
well.
wow.
Yeah, they're massive, you know, like with the windy.
Oh, I see those.
Yeah. So literally that whole thing, if that could get factored in at the start before the kind of brief is like before the actual floor plate is drawn out in CAD, I just think it makes for an amazing design, you know, and thinking about how people transition through a floor plate as well. So like, say, for example, someone's day in the life is in the morning, I like to get a coffee. Then I usually have like my one-to-ones. And then I've got this meeting. You can go, okay, so they're coming in. They'll probably go to the canteen first or the catering space in the office. Then they're going to go to a booth because that's a one-to-one meeting. And then they're going to have to go back. So it gives you an idea of what type of spaces are required to help support that person to be able to do the best job.
And so do you actually map that out?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. You can heat map out like the day in the life of for teams, not for individuals, because you can't pander to every individual, but like literally for teams, okay, these are the type of spaces that they say that they require. Obviously there's that whole pushback piece as well that comes with it. So sometimes people will be like, oh, I'd really like to have my own desk, like in the office. And that's the bit where I would kind of be as an independent, a bit more kind of like push back and be like, well, from a sustainability perspective, we're not going to have one desk to one person that's going to sit empty when you're working from home. Then they start to understand, okay, that makes sense. It's not about me, it's about the planet and everything else. So yeah, having that kind of conversation, really digging into what people need, and also thinking through the lens of like, what do they need to get ahead as well? So the other thing would be like innovation spaces, like how are they brainstorming and innovating, and what spaces can you create to make that easy, you know?
Yeah. What are the most common spaces that people use?
God, I think obviously you've got delivery desks, so the normal delivery, workstations. You've got meeting rooms, you've got cafe areas or fuel stations, whatever you call them. And I've noticed a lot more quiet spaces are coming into play as well, like library spaces. But some of the more innovative companies are doing really cool spaces like decompression dens and things like that, where people can just go completely soundproof, chilled out spaces. Sometimes there's music in there that just calm people down. So if you're feeling a bit anxious or whatever during the day, you can just bob into there, sit down, relax and refresh yourself. So I think there's like various areas that space, you know, that companies can build in. But thinking through that kind of like you said at the very start, when you talk about like how busy your day is, like how are you going to rebalance yourself in between all of those meetings? So like little windows between meetings, what are you going to do in those windows? How are you going to create spaces that are going to support you to recharge?
Yeah, because meetings can be like very back to back to back and day after day, and you don't actually get that time to recharge and make sure that you're going to be the best version of yourself. And not even for yourself, but for the person you're talking to, out of respect to them. And so I love the idea of a decompression den. Just its alliteration is enough for me. So how about disability and accessibility? That you must have touched on that like a lot,
Yeah, a lot.
because
So
Nike is very inclusive.
it is, yeah. But do you know what? I think it's still looking at it through like there's so many disabilities that aren't visible, right? So I think sometimes we look at a floor plan and we go, okay, like, you know, there's equal routes in, you know, there's a lift that somebody in a wheelchair can get in, etc. But then are we thinking through the idea of like diabetes as a disability and like blindness as a disability and all these other factors that, do you know what I mean, sometimes we can overlook. So I'm like a huge advocate for like universal design. So I feel like there's so many spaces that it's a disconnected journey. So like somebody in a wheelchair, as an example, might be able to get into the building fine, but then how do they get a coffee cup off a shelf that's way up here and they can't reach it, you know? So it's that whole thing of the journey through the space and making it as easy as possible. And I've noticed a lot, phone booths, things like that are coming into play. You can never get in a phone booth, right, if you're in a wheelchair, because it's a lip to get in. So it's like, how can we make sure when we buy things like that, that they are at ground level, you can wheel in, that the desk can go up and down, etc. in the phone booth, all that kind of jazz. And yeah, and thinking about, again, design looks beautiful if you can see, but say you're partially sighted and you've got every color just slightly different, like how do you see the ends of things so people don't trip up and all that kind of stuff? So there's so many different things that you can look at when you're trying to design for everybody.
How do you cater for diabetes?
Well, it's things like the next layer of that. So obviously I'm doing experiences as well. So it's like the catering wise, like is all the catering kind of supporting someone with diabetes, or are we going to get like sugar highs, and do people know how to support people like first aid wise and everything with that, you know, if people having hypos and stuff like that. So yeah, it's trying to make sure that everything's connected. So not only does the workspace look amazing, the services layered on top are amazing and inclusive, and obviously then people feel like they can be themselves. So yeah.
Do you think, like, for people to actually engage in the space, they need to understand the story behind it? Like, I'm just picking up on what you said about working from home. So that desk, it wouldn't be sustainable to have it sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
You basically told a mini story or gave an explanation. But workspaces have so much story behind it, even unintentionally, like the decisions made and why they were made. And if the company's doing it for the good of the people, which we give them credit for, there's actually a lot of money being spent and time to ensure that they are really flourishing. And I think to help people lift the lid and on the ceiling on their own selves, they need to almost understand what that space is and what's gone into it. So how can you actually tell that story?
Do you know, it's so important to tell the story. There's so many things that we do, and because all of us have been in this industry probably quite a long time, we take things for granted and we expect because we know other people will know, and that's not the reality. So I think you can physically display at the story of things. So you can use QR codes on furniture that might be recycled or whatever it is. But I also think like a lot of the data that we have to collect from an FM perspective, so like water quality, let's say, air quality, all of that stuff that is like legally happening, Legionella testing, all of that stuff, we never communicate that to colleagues. Like, we care about you, and these are all the things that we've been doing, you know, like digital signage when you come into the building, or, you know, this floor is busy today. If you're not liking lots of people, go and sit here. Like, we don't communicate a lot of the stuff we do. So I think having some sort of like visual digital board or whatever as you walk into a building, that onboarding piece as well, like really giving people time to see the space, touch the space, feel it, and like tell them about it, makes people realize the level of detail that you've gone into to create the space. Because I think sometimes you just walk in, like you go to an amazing hotel, you just walk in, you go, this is amazing, but you don't know anything about it.
No.
And then when you learn, like, oh, you know, this was this and X was that, like it makes you love the space even more, doesn't it? And you know what? It makes you value the space more. So I think then, you know, leaving dirty coffee cups as an example, or like those kind of disrespectful behaviors, they're not going to be as prevalent because people realize the level of detail that you've gone into to create that space.
As humans, we have got an inert hardwire to nature, which I find quite exciting, which is why when going for a run out in the woods, everyone can have that feeling. Can we bring that intelligently into the office, or is it just a few potted plants?
Oh God. You know, when you say few potted plants, I like start to sweat because I just hate that. Like in terms of when people create designs, it's like when they put in these odd pots of plants here and there and it hasn't got a flow and it hasn't got a story behind it. It's my idea of hell, to be totally honest with you.
Good.
So I'm in favour of trying to find spaces initially where you can have patio areas or balconies so that you can actually give people another space to go into. So like an outdoor space, even in, like people say in London, oh, you can use it once a year. I think it's really short-sighted because actually sometimes it can be cold and you still want to go outside and feel connected to big planting, little planting, etc. outside. So plants for me are super important. I like them to be part of the design. So a lot of the projects that I've worked on, they've been built into like booths. So the back of booths might be planted, etc. So they're part of the scheme. Yeah, I'm not in favour of just the odd plant. And also I should say, the maintenance of the plants, like that's a big one where you go into beautiful projects where they were gorgeous when you first went in, but then 6 months down the line they're not being maintained. So I think making sure that you're allocating budget for that maintenance of the planting is also really important.
Why don't we just have plastic plants?
Oh, I hate them. No,
Okay. Why do you hate them?
You can't have plastic plants because it's not very environmentally friendly for starts. But I think more than anything, you want the actual plants to get rid of all the terrible things that are in the air and pump out nice oxygen. That's as simple as that. Yeah,
I agree. I also think that people are a little bit obsessed with having two things: having a plant in the office, whereas actually we can, back to your thing on the patio, which reminded me of it. If there's planters out on the patio, aren't we using that every day? Like, we can see it. If there's glass, we can see the patio, we can see the plants. We don't have to be able to touch them to feel the benefit of them. I know you're not getting the sort of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide air cleaning thing because they're outside. I get it. But visually, we've still got that connection to nature.
Yeah.
So, okay, not 365 days because we don't work that many days, but 240, 50 days of the year, whatever the weather, you can see those plants. You may even be within a reasonably close proximity to them, and that can actually create a benefit. Right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
I also think people underestimate in biophilia that it seems like the word plants has been replaced with biophilia, and actually biophilia is much deeper than that.
Yeah,
because it's about sunlight and it's about natural daylight, circadian rhythms. It's about timber's a massive natural resource, and that's very sustainable and very easy, readily to use. The sounds that we can use of nature, that type of thing, water, how we could use like water features, that's proven to improve our cognitive memory. And there's so many ways that we can actually bring in biophilia deeper than plants, isn't there? Have you had experience with that?
Not so much. I mean, we've done like installations in retail now when I was back at Nike, which was more around like a feeling, because obviously it was for an installation around water and biophilia. But generally in buildings, I think it's more like baseline levels. I think so many companies aren't doing anything in this space, to be honest, that just anything is better than nothing. But definitely the more planting that you can have in a space, the more people feel calm, relaxed in the spaces. And like you said, great way to give acoustics, like as in to manage sound transfer back and forth without that kind of hard fixed partitioning as well.
Does green impact the human mind?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah,
Do you know about psychology of colour?
Yeah, green
tell me
is
about it.
well, green is, they call it God's colour. So that's the whole thing of green. Yeah. And it's naturally known to be like a really calming colour. And then you've got other colours like the yellows, which are obviously like really inspirational colours and make you feel optimistic. So the colour palette of an office really does impact how you feel in the space. And I've seen some like crazy examples recently where one particular company I was working with, they had meeting rooms which with like deep red walls. And I was like, but like warning type red, if you know what I mean. And I thought to myself, gosh, no one's going to want to use that room. When we looked at the data at the back end, no one was using that room. And then the other colours with the more muted palettes and things like that, people were booking more often. Technology, furniture, everything exactly the same, just the colour of the walls that was different.
You've actually proved that
with data. With data behind. Yeah.
I mean, I can feel the difference, talking about the feel again.
Yeah.
When you walk into different spaces and colours, they do change how you feel. And I totally agree with that. Like yellow's uplifting and blue's great for communication, focusing, etc. Green's calm. But to actually have the data of two identical rooms, one's a fire engine red and one's a muted colour.
Yeah.
And you actually got less usage.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just an ROI. I mean, people's health and everything, it's top of my priority list, but some people that are just looking at ROI, I mean, that's a key. That's just wasted space, isn't it? That you can just use with the pop.
Yeah. But that's what I was saying originally, like data is super powerful, but actually I feel like in workplaces we record the wrong things. So people are focusing on, let's say, recording occupancy. So how many badge swipes into a building? You think about the resource that it takes to manage that amount of data coming in. And then things like people's happiness in the workspace or people's like psychological safety, we're not assessing and measuring any of that, which for me is counterproductive. Like those are the most important things. How do people actually feel in the space, and do they want to come to work, and how are they feeling in terms of like empowerment, progression of their careers and all that kind of stuff. And I get that corporate real estate probably don't sit in that space, but actually as a business, why are we recording these things? And surely we have a duty of care to make sure we're recording the right things, basically.
How would you record someone's happiness?
Oh, there's so many ways.
How?
Yeah. So you can do like the usual just scoring in sense of like every day. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but in Microsoft Viva Insights, there's a little bit there where you can select like how you're feeling on that particular day. And all of that data sits at the back end and usually sits with the company HR team or the technology team. And you can get the thematic, like how people are feeling by the day if they do that. You can do pulse checks within your team. So like you can score people, like say you score yourself today 1 to 5, how are you feeling? And if you're really super clever, you can then track business activities, and you'll see things like accountancy firms I've worked with in the past. You'll see month end, their figures drop off because obviously it's stressful. They've got to get all the data, all their finances rolled up, and you can see it in the data that comes through. So you can do it like macro level or in team level and just see how people are feeling like that. But the number one important thing is when you hear how people are feeling, you need to do something about it. And I think that's unfortunately what a lot of companies don't do. They take the data in of like, things that people want to see improve, and they acknowledge it and they say, thank you very much for like, telling us all of this, but they don't come back and say what they're going to do about it. So then people get survey fatigue and don't want to fill things out.
Interesting. I didn't know that about Microsoft
Viva Insights, yeah, there's so much in there. And like actually as a platform within the Microsoft normal thing, there's meditation bits in there, there's access to Headspace, there's so much in there. And it can even show you like who you're connecting with. So for big organizations, you can even see like who's in your immediate network, who you've chatted to most. And the super important thing, if you're in a virtual meeting, are you focused and present, or are you typing as well at the same time in your meetings? It's only data that you can see yourself, but it gets rolled up into big data that obviously your company has access to. So yeah, and I love using those kind of technology things because it's things that people don't even know are being assessed, but it's not going to impact on their career progression or anything like that, because obviously no one can see that granular detail apart from you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I could, as a member of a team, I could say that I'm unhappy, and they can't tell that it's me that's done it.
No.
But they can tell that people in my area are, and it's when negative Nancy's around.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, really clever. And I don't know why, but it doesn't seem like Microsoft have kind of like pushed that out as much as maybe I think they should do. It's just that obviously it's my space, so I know that this exists.
Any other golden nuggets for us?
I'm trying to think. I'm a big fan of this 1 to 5 thing. So I think sometimes when you are starting a week or, whole thing in your team, you're starting the week off, just asking people how you feel in 1 to 5. I really like that as a way of just gauging people's like ability to take on new tasks. So if, for example, somebody said, oh, I'm 5, which is like, I'm excellent, I feel amazing this week. Right, that's a week where we can really get stuff done this week because everyone feels really good. Next week, people might be a 2. Okay, well, they're not going to be super like charged this week. Let's see who is in the team and let's see if we can flex people. And I think by asking 1 to 5, it takes the emotion out of it. So if you're having like a crappy week, you don't have to explain what's going on. I'm having arguments with my boyfriend, or this is going wrong, or whatever, because you might not want to say that to your boss, but you could say I'm going to chew, and there's no emotion in that whatsoever.
Yeah, but then for the boss to make sure that's not judgmental.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And ultimately, I think it goes back to that management training of, acknowledging that in the corporate world, we always expect people to perform up here all the time consistently. And we know from sport, like you've talked about your love of running, you can't constantly run like this full pelt every day, but in the corporate world it's kind of like a baseline expectation that that's what you should be doing. So I think any manager who really is going to get the best out of their team needs to appreciate there's going to be times where you're absolutely pumped, going, and there's times where you're just not feeling your best, and if you can flex that workload across the team, distribute it in a way that everybody is looked after, I think you're going to end up getting more out of your team.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Wicked. I'll wrap it up. Well, thank you so much. That was really insightful, chatting about the purpose and the place and the planet and the people, and really about the people. Actually, you brought some really exciting tips that I'm taking away. I'm learning, definitely. So thank you very much, and Bex, and we'll close off this episode now. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you.
Same here.